Welcome to today's video. Today Josh, Gore, and I are going to be covering over what the UCLS model standards are for a record of survey and what that means in a record of survey. So this is going to help you understand what you're purchasing when you purchase a professional land survey and how to read that survey so you get the maximum benefit from it. So before we get started today, we do have timestamps in this video. So if you take your mouse to the bottom, there's going to be timestamps that you can jump around to the different topics that Josh and I are going to cover today. Or you're welcome to stay with us for the whole conversation. Either way, we hope that you get something out of your time with us today. We're pleased to have Josh Gore with us. Josh, would you mind introducing yourself?
Sure. My name's Josh Gore. I am a professional land surveyor. I have been in the industry for about 19 years at this point. I've kind of covered it all in the aspects of land surveying, anything from boundary to boundary surveys, all the way to topographic and bathymetric surveys, and everything in between. So I think I've got a good grasp on at least getting my toes wet in what land surveying is.
I'd say a little bit more than wet, you know. But yeah, myself, I'm Tyler Harper. I am the founder of Highland Land Surveying. I've got a bachelor's degree in geomatics and land surveying and have been in the industry pushing 6 years now. So alongside Josh, I might be able to get my toes wet in what professional land survey entails here. So I wanted to ask you, Josh, so we've got up here the Utah Council of Land Surveys Standards of Practice for Boundary Surveys. I'd really like to get your intake on introduction here, number 3. Why do you think people would benefit from understanding this part of the standards?
Well, I guess to start out, the importance of these standards are guidelines to hold surveyors to, as far as in the location of Utah. Every surveyor is licensed in a specific state, sometimes multiple states, and so certain standards are held in each state. And this put forth by the Utah Council of Land Surveyors. So in the introduction, item number 3, it refers to the standards and how it guides the surveyors to provide a professional product. There's always people that work with the surveyor, such as field personnel or CAD drafting, and they are also held to that standard through the professional license.
I think that it's also important to note that these standards themselves are in addition to what the Utah State Code is. The way that surveyors are supposed to look at this is you've got the Utah State Code. This is explaining what us as a profession should do to adhere to what the state code is intending to accomplish, if you will, right?
Yeah. So in continuing with that, item number 5 under that section 1 refers to professional land surveyors being licensed. So there's a process that has to be adhered to for a surveyor to become licensed in the state of Utah and in all other states. There's certain laws set forth to ensure that the surveyor has an abundant amount of knowledge and experience to help better serve the public in kind of holding that role as a land surveyor.
Yeah, one of the things I find really profound in our licensing is that the intent of the license as a professional land surveyor is to protect the health, safety, and welfare of the public. It's quite unique, really, of all the other licensing processes of the state of Utah goes through, because how involved we are as surveyors in the public's daily lives. I mean, I guess in your experience, why would it be important for someone to understand that our job as a surveyor is to protect them and the public?
Well, one of the key roles of a surveyor is identifying property boundaries. In essence, that's people's property rights. As a surveyor, you can go forward and make a boundary determination based on that information. Houses can be built, all sorts of structures, easements are created that public utilities run through. And so if all of that wasn't in place, it would be kind of a jungle out there of anything. No one would be held to any standard. It would just be a big mess.
Oh man, land rights, right?
Yeah.
What would be the purpose of even recording your deed at that point? If you couldn't have a security that you're getting what you're paying for when you buy the land.
Exactly. Most people don't want their neighbor wall to be right up against the property line, which, if your house was built in that same fashion, you wouldn't get the privacy that you might want, even if you're out in the middle of nowhere. If you have land to graze cattle or other livestock, that is a very valuable resource. And so the surveyor being able to help protect those rights is a very fundamental aspect of what we do.
Oh, yeah. And I'm also, thinking of taking even a step further, say for commercial properties, right? Where a building has been built over the property line. And then on the top of that, they've got roof drains that are continuing to encroach and doorways and prescriptive easement to get to the side of the building. And all this happened without the adjoining neighbor knowing nothing about it until they wanted to build on their raw piece of ground and got a survey, and those findings were disclosed.
Yeah. So, whenever I read that section talking about the safety, I've always kind of wondered, like, okay, what is a surveyor going to do to help keep people safe? There's a lot of different aspects of surveying, and one of those would be any type of construction, layout, for example. Have you ever gone down a road and all of a sudden there was a massive bump when it shouldn't have been? Say you're traveling at 70 miles an hour and all your tires come off the ground. That could be a very, very big issue. Luckily, with surveyors, we're able to be trained in the art of surveying with very precise instrumentation to help analyze those thoroughfares to see, this is going to be a potential problem. We can calculate slopes, we can look at ground and see what it's doing, look at the different obstacles that we have to work around, and proceed that way.
Yeah. Well, and that also leads to, man, how don't we protect the public? That also leads to, even in the design phase of the road, right? Gathering the spatial data for everyone involved in the design to really understand what is necessary to make the design work. If you don't have a professional involved, they're going to miss key elements of detail that needs to be included in their spatial intelligence for the design. And ultimately, it will affect the design, and design likely will fail. I think we've established really that the surveyor's role ultimately is to protect the public, and the standards that the UCLS has graciously put together helps, one, surveyors know what's expected of them, but also the public to understand what they should expect of their surveyor. As we continue on here and look at section 3 here and the standards, and start with when you are trying to hire a surveyor, what is the surveyor looking for, and what kind of data the surveyor is going to want to know. When you're looking at someone that may be wanting a survey, why is it important to know what the purpose of their survey is? Why are they talking to you?
Well, I think, to start it all off, surveying is a professional service, and it's not like you're ordering a pizza. It really doesn't work that way. The surveyor should have a good grasp of what challenges might exist on the project. Section 3, number 2 is to determine the scope. The surveyor goes through a process when you call in to make that request as far as getting a record of survey or boundary survey done. He'll have a conversation, ask about the property, different features.
Yeah.
He'll do a little preliminary research and see what's in the area, or maybe he's already done projects in the area so he knows what challenges may exist.
Even today, talking with a potential client, they were telling me that they wanted to build a shop in their backyard. Okay, done work in the area. Like you said, I knew what challenges to expect. No monumentation for the subdivision that he was in, and the subdivision itself was quite old. So I gave him my price for the boundary survey so he could have confidence in his setbacks to build his shop. After that, he proceeds to tell me about how he had a contractor at his property, and the contractor disclosed they might need to build a retaining wall to make the shop work. Well, being a professional, I recognize that if a retaining wall needs to be built, he's going to need topography. So that all of a sudden changed the scope of my services to not only just a boundary survey, but topographic survey as well, just to make sure the client's taken care of. Like at the end of the day, we want to make sure that our clients and the public is taken care of.
Yep, definitely. There's a lot of valuable information shared between the client and the surveyor when the client first reaches out to request for a professional survey, which kind of leads into our number 3 topic, which is to evaluate the capabilities of the surveyor. The surveyor that you're hiring is a trained professional. We all have different kinds of experiences, different scopes of work that we become more accustomed to.
More niched in, and also schooling, different levels of education that's involved. A true professional should be able to be honest with themselves and with their client if it's a service that they're truly capable of providing. So in continuing on that, as you continue to progress with selecting a professional surveyor to do your services, they should send you a written agreement that specifies what they're gonna do in the services, timing, and estimated cost for the project. Why would it be important for not just the surveyor, but more importantly, the people that we serve to have an agreement?
Like many aspects of life, to set expectations. If the client, the general public, goes to a surveyor and requests something, and the surveyor thinks they have their head wrapped around it and says, okay, I'm going to do this. If that agreement wasn't there and the client wasn't able to view that agreement, they wouldn't really know what to expect. And then when the surveyor came and said, project's done, here you go, well, that's not the pizza that I ordered. That's not what I was really after. So they kind of missed that mark. So to have an agreement in writing, it protects the client, it protects the surveyor, and at the end of the day, you get a product that you're really searching for.
Yeah, it's a great opportunity for the client itself to really look at what the surveyor is proposing and verify that the services that you're getting are in line with what you truly need, and that you're not getting a service that you don't need, for one, or that you are getting the services that you actually do need. And so that's a great way to verify that both the client and the surveyor are on the same page.
Continuing on with the technical procedures, when you do engage a surveyor to do the work, most times it's going to be for a record of survey. Whether it's to build a house or create a site plan or to construct a fence, there's a process that the surveyor needs to go through right at the beginning as record research. What do you do first when you begin your research process?
Oh man, research is one of my favorite parts. Glad you asked. We see here on the record research, it comes right here to there, search real property records. Evidence of your property boundaries is recorded with the county. And so sometimes we end up going to the county courthouse themselves and researching the records at the county recorder. For other counties, such as Weber County, they have those records available online all the way back to 1980, which is really, really convenient for us as surveyors. We pull those deeds and the other surveys or subdivision plats that may affect your property boundaries, read them, perform calculations on their position. Then we go to your neighbors and we check for ambiguities that might be present, and compile all that information to prepare us to go out to the field. Because when we're armed with knowledge that there may be ambiguities present within a certain line, we're able to try and resolve those from findings in the field. In your case, say you've already done the research. Moving on to the preliminary research analysis, how do you put together your preliminary research analysis?
A lot of times, as you say, there's ambiguity in the record or in the documents that have been recorded. Sometimes the surveyor has to go way back in time and go
past 1980?
Past 1980, and go all the way back to patent at times to truly do a boundary resolution. So the surveyor takes all that information, analyzes it, finds where there might be errors, and then it kind of becomes a puzzle. Taking each piece of that puzzle, such as a deed or a record of survey, and trying to get those all to fit within each other. Trying to see, do these lines match, or is there a gap or an overlap in these descriptions? It's all part of this grand puzzle when it all comes to a complete survey.
Once I start trying to put that puzzle piece together and it comes to reality that some of the math isn't adding up, that's when a lot of magic starts to happen, and where you get a lot of value from the selection you made in your professional land surveyor, because there's application of boundary law that is able to be applied that is orderly to protect you and the public and where the deficiencies or excess is placed.
Yeah, and to help with those resolutions, that's when you actually see the surveyor in the field. Everyone knows us by the guy looking through the camera or looking through this instrument, and you'll see these surveyors out, and they are actually recording information about that property, where existing fence lines are for the property and adjoining properties, where the road is, right-of-way information. There's survey monumentation all throughout the state. There's record information, and using those locations, the physical locations of where they are on the ground, they can use that information to help.
It's also referred to that here in the UCLS standards as the field investigation and survey. I like to call it the site investigation portion of the survey. And it's really where some of the magic takes place in determining where to place excess and deficiencies are. You would be surprised where you find some boundary evidence. For example, buried axles or stones are very common. What are some crazy monuments that you found that have been controlling for a boundary?
I think one of the most exciting finds that I've done was up one of the Cottonwood Canyons, retracing a mining claim. The only plat or piece of record information that we had was an 8.5 by 11 sheet of paper that had a hand-drawn sketch of the boundary of this mining claim. Of course, it was a really old document. Went up in the hills and just started searching. There wasn't a lot of information. I tried to scale off of where this ridge line was. I was finally able to find a point. And the thing that was really cool about this point is this was, it was a wood post with some carvings in it that were clearly from the 1800s.
Right.
That's probably about the oldest thing that I found doing research or the field work. So there's little pieces of evidence like that all throughout the state, throughout the country, that help surveyors retrace these boundaries.
Then again, that goes to one, the expertise and knowledge and being able to recognize that, but two, really getting into the weeds with the record research. Do you think you would have been able to find that if you wouldn't have had that wagon trail map?
Yeah, if I didn't have that map, I can imagine it'd be even harder. Yep, it'd be even harder than it was.
So once we get to the field survey, obviously we are to locate and describe lines of occupation. So sometimes that's described as rule of thumb of, say, 5 feet from a boundary line. Sometimes we extend that to 20, depending on what the scope of the service is or what the type of property is and what the property is going to be used for. And the needs of the client, of course. But really we want to make sure that everyone's aware of where items are in relation to their property boundaries. Now we get into computations and conclusions, and this is where we're getting close to actually being able to make a boundary determination. It's taking all that data and trying to make sense of it in a way that means something to everyone else except for us, right?
So I think we've gotten to a point to where this puzzle that we're trying to put together, the pieces are close, but they're not quite snapped into place. And so at this stage in the investigation, we're taking each piece and making sure that it lines up perfect with the piece next to it. And that is the process of creating a boundary resolution.
Right, and if it's not perfect, then it's applying those elements of boundary law for the excess and deficiencies? Where do they get placed? And if there's ever an issue, your decision needs to be able to hold up against other surveyors that may scrutinize your work, but also in court, right?
Yeah.
So there's a lot of weight that we carry, a lot of liability to make sure we're doing this right.
Yeah. Eventually, all of these documents that the surveyor creates, the record of survey, that goes into the public record and is information that can be pulled back out forever as long as it's needed.
We might as well go ahead and talk about Section 7 here and how we as professional land surveyors convey this vast amount of information that we've gathered and the understanding that we have and ultimately our determination on a survey plat, right?
Yeah. So this kind of goes back to the very beginning when we started our boundary research. We reached out and we looked for other surveys that have been done right in that area. And using that information, we're able to project the findings of that survey, and that might shed some valuable light on many issues that we're trying to resolve as well. So that brings us to our next point. Within the process of a record of survey or boundary survey, to the actual finished product, the plat. Besides just the surveyor going out and putting points in the ground and saying, here's one property corner, here's the next one, now you can build your fence. The surveyor will create a plat that discusses the whole process he went through to establish this boundary. So we have an example here done by Tyler. On sheet number 1, you'll see there's a few different sections here. I'd like to start with the top left over in this area. So that is the vicinity map or control detail. In this situation, it shows the subject property, it shows the roads that are nearby, and some of the survey control or the monumentation that the surveyor went to make this boundary determination. After that, Tyler's placed the data reference table, and that data reference table goes through and identifies all of the research that was done to help assist with this boundary determination. And that gives important information such as the recording information, the name of the property owner, and then the document type and things of that nature. And then to the real meat of the survey plat is the survey narrative. And Tyler, do you mind going through and explaining some of the processes that you went through and break down the narrative and the importance of it?
This is part of what the pinnacle of this video is, right? To help people understand how to read a survey. And Josh, thank you for pointing out those features. They're definitely key elements in a survey. But as far as the surveyor narrative goes, it's the backbone of your survey. That's the old wagon trail map and accompanying. For you, Josh, if you had that map plus a record of what they set that said, oh, you're going to find a post here,
it would help a lot. If I knew exactly what I was looking for, was it a stone that was buried in the ground with some markings carved on the side, or was it a wood post? That information is very valuable.
Right, and that's where we're getting into the surveyor's narrative. And today's standards, we take it a step further. Besides just saying what we set, we are referencing this data reference table in the surveyor's narrative. So as we were saying, those excess and deficiencies, when we find those ambiguities, our analysis from the findings in the field, but then also the application of boundary law, is explained in that surveyor's narrative. It comes down, and in addition to that, it's also explaining the sources of those laws, if applicable. In some cases, like here in EB 1 through 4, I'm giving the source of the law, which is a court case, Q2 versus Hughes, which obviously adds validity to this is a legit law and should be noted. Being a surveyor yourself, Josh, where's the first place when you're questioning a boundary that you're going to look for solid reasoning in what's happening?
Well, of course, I go right to the narrative because that gives a clear analysis of what happened or what what I can look for on the survey, it really breaks off that down and makes it crystal clear.
A lot of times what I found in my experience of doing professional land surveying, it eliminates the need for a neighbor to get another survey because they don't trust what the other surveyor did. If they had a narrative that benefited the map, another surveyor is going to likely not even take the job because they know what's going on clearly, or a neighboring neighbor is going to understand what's going on as they consult the appropriate professionals.
Exactly. There's an immense amount of clarification that can be found in the narrative, and it is very important as such.
There's times that the narrative gets skipped over and doesn't get as much detail as it really the UCLS standards demands and our industry demands, and it ends up harming the public. And here we've got something that really stands to protect everyone.
With that, a few other sections that you'll find on the face of this page here is the record boundary descriptions, which reference what was in the data reference table. That's some of that technical terminology. And then you'll see the composite boundary description. So in this scenario, there were several parcels that were surveyed, and then an overall description was created to identify where exactly that parcel lands on the ground.
Yeah, and really we shy away from writing new legal descriptions for properties unless we absolutely have to. And as Josh was explaining, part of the purposes of this survey was to prepare for a subdivision, combine all the parcels into one to be subdivided. And as such, an overall description was necessary. But if that wasn't the case, I wouldn't have touched it. The record is perfectly clear in these record boundary descriptions on what the intent of the grantor was when those parcels were created.
Now, if we go over to sheet number 2, we'll see this is kind of the picture. This is what everyone wants to look at. This is what, we look at and say, okay, there's my house, there's my driveway, there's my fence. And there's a few key pieces to this plat and the different parts of it that you want to look at for it.
Going back to really what makes a survey identified, right? Those key features. So if we come in here and zoom in, you can see that we found some old fence posts here. We can see that the fence is pretty well right on the property line as it should. We can see information regarding points of beginnings. This here is the course and bearing and distance along that line. We can get some dimensioning as the fence varies a little bit more, and have an understanding of the relationship to the fence in that case, to the boundary. What are some other key elements that you like to highlight in your surveys that may be found on this one?
I think the main thing is really knowing where the boundary is, and that's done through different points that were set on the ground. So, for example, there's a point there that it's labeled as set rebar and cap. So that was where the surveyor went out and said, this is your property corner. Physically set a point in the ground that can be walked to. A fence company can go and pull a string to and know exactly where the boundary is at.
That's the accompanying map, right? That's for the wagon trail.
Yep, exactly.
And knowing what was set. I love that. Some other key elements that are found is when we're tracing an original line, you get information to what the record was and then what was actually measured on that course. And in this case, luckily for the surveyor, the two deeds that lined up each other had the same record. And as you can see, it's reflected there on the plat. These things get really important when working with other professionals such as title companies, for them to really digest what the surveyor is doing and what they've done on the property.
And you'll see in other places there's some notes on parcel numbers and the acreage of those or that accompany those parcel numbers. That's pretty valuable information, especially from the retracement point. Any little bit of information, whether it's a distance or acreage, that's valuable, but above all is the physical points in the ground or the different features that identify the property lines.
And in this case, it ended up being invaluable for the clients that, hired me to do it, because they were trying to purchase the property. And of course, the purchase agreements were based on what was on record and not what was actually found. And so luckily for them, they had a survey that had accurate square footages that based their purchase contract on.
There's just a ton of good information on there. You'll see places where, for example, Tyler's got some little blow-up areas or details of things that he felt was important to identify on that survey. So every little bit of information on here should really try to digest and understand what the surveyor was trying to accomplish by identifying those points.
If we come over here to detail 2, we can see that there's some really technical things that are happening. Notably there where it's saying C deed line, C narrative, sectional EB and EC. So in this case, the survey itself, this plat map, is referencing what the surveyor's mind state was and the law that he went through to make his boundary retracement determination. And as we can see, obviously the surveyor saw a discrepancy in the boundary, as he called it, a deed line, not a property line, and was disclosing that that issue was there, but it's duly resolved by applicable law.
Yeah.
Invaluable for one another surveyor and to the client that's trying to buy this property.
And then, of course, at the very end of it all, you'll see the surveyor's stamp, his seal, the signature and the date. That is what makes it an official document and ready to be recorded with the county or the city or state.
And really the significance of a seal is certifying that the data on here is true and correct, right? And that we make the measurements and that we are certifying to those measurements as being true and correct. And as such, being certifiers to it, we're also liable for those measurements. There's one other element that people may find value, and that's the legend here, and North Point and Scale Bar. What frustrations might the public have if they don't understand what's going on with this part of the survey?
As you look at the plat, there's lines with X's and lines with dots and random rectangles and things like that, different shapes and patterns. Without the legend, it would be very confusing to understand.
The legend itself gives you an understanding of what those lines and dots and X's truly are. The scale bar here, it helps understanding what the scale of the drawing is to, and if for whatever reason it gets printed on, say, 11 by 17, you can still make a scaled measurements because you've got a scale bar there to reference what the scale factor was that shrunk down the document. And North Point obviously helps you orient the document to north. I'd like to thank everyone for joining us in going over the UCLS standards, what we do as professional surveyors to protect your property, and how to read a professional survey and really what that survey does in protecting you. Thank you for being here, Josh.
Thanks for having me.